The leader of Libya's National Transitional Council, Mahmoud Jibril, addressed the United Nations General Assembly over the weekend. Mr. Jibril calls on the international community to lift sanctions against his country. He says a new Libya is coming to life as a nation committed to democracy and reintegration into the international community.
Today I stand before you, Excellencies, to show the world that a new Libya is coming to life. A Libya that looks forward, a Libya that has a view to redevelop itself, that wants to heal its wounds, a Libya that wants to overcome its pain, that wants to reach out to the entire world. It wants to rebuild itself, to reform its history.
Jibril calls for the UN Security Council to unfreeze Libya's assets so the country can pay for its development. Now, joining us from the United Nations headquarters with some final impressions on this year's UN General Assembly is VOA UN correspondent Margaret Besheer. Margaret, thank you for joining us again today.
Hi, Ndimyake.
Hi. Well, obviously most of, or if not all, the world leaders have left, but I imagine the impact of their words is still being heard. Just picking up from what Mr. Jibril was saying, last year it was the now deposed leader Muammar Gaddafi speaking at that very podium, and now it's a whole new team.
Actually, Muammar Gaddafi was here 2 years ago. That was the only time he actually ever came here in 42 years of leading Libya. It was 2 years ago. But in fact, Mr. Jibril is still here at the UN today, and he's just about to address a Security Council meeting right now on Libya. It's the monthly meeting that they've instituted since resolutions 1970 and 1973 were adopted dealing with the situation there. And I'm sure he will again make the plea for them to lift sanctions. About 2 weeks ago, the Council did adopt another resolution to gradually lift sanctions. They lifted them from the national banks and some corporations, but they didn't lift them off of individuals because, for instance, the Gaddafi family is under sanctions, so those probably still won't be lifted. But he did ask them, in other words, to lift the ones that are affecting their ability to govern the country.
Thank you, Margaret, for that correction. Now, going back earlier, we just heard from also another newcomer, South Sudanese President Salva Kiir, and his hopes for the country. Just on Friday, I believe you mentioned how the issue of Abyei and Southern Kordofan also needs to be addressed. So what is your take on his message and what action can be expected?
Well, as we saw in the package in the interview, and he did speak at the podium, he's really talking about construction. And he made the point of saying it's construction, not reconstruction, because he said that they really had nothing in South Sudan to rebuild after a conflict. So I think that he's really focused on developing his country, and I think he does want peace with the North because they can't have development without peace.
And then also moving on to another very important issue there, and that is the issue of drought and famine in the Horn of Africa. There was a mini summit over the weekend. Can you tell us what happened and what we can expect?
Yeah, several leaders were here for that, African leaders. The Secretary General hosted it. They raised about $218 million in additional pledges for humanitarian assistance to the Horn of Africa countries that are most affected. And the World Bank announced nearly $2 billion in additional funding for programs that will help sort of longer-term responses to drought and famine. And I think Josette Sheeran, the head of the World Food Program, she made a very relevant point. She said that droughts can't necessarily be prevented, but famines can. And I think that was really the essence of the meeting Saturday, was to find ways to brainstorm, to find solutions, how the international community can prevent these catastrophes from happening.
All right, Margaret Besheer, thank you so much for that update from the UN.